What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, the history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, February 6, 2018, getting into the week here. Just now watching the launch of the Falcon Heavy by SpaceX. It is the world's most powerful single-use rocket and basically can lift twice the load of the Delta IV for about one-third the price. And the two outer cores have made it back successfully. I was distracted getting into the show here. I don't know if the center core made it back, but it's definitely a huge success. Apparently, the center core has to land on the drone ship, whereas the other two cores were able to get back to Cape Kennedy, which makes a lot of sense when you look at the flight path. So well done, SpaceX, and it's kind of exciting to see America back in the space business after NASA being reduced to little more than a rubber stamp on Al Gore's global warming scam. But it is exciting. And, of course, it reminds me of my youth when I was involved in this, and we were all caught up in that excitement of the new frontier. And I guess for kids today, it's just part of the background noise. It's something that's always been. They've never known a time when there wasn't something orbiting overhead. But people my age, I was born before there was such a thing as an orbiting satellite, when going into space was still the domain, if not the V-2 rockets, obviously, but science fiction. I was born at a time when a lot of people seriously believed there was an intelligent civilization on Mars. When looking at the planets, all you could see was a very fuzzy dot of light for the more distant ones. And look at all that has happened since then. It's been exciting to watch it happen. And well done, SpaceX. Absolutely well done. Now then, getting on to the other news, another wild day on the Dow. It basically been fluctuating red, green, and then toward the end of the trading day, the plunge protection team got to work, and they managed to shove the Dow up about 568 at the close, which doesn't erase the losses over the last few days. And of course, anybody who was trying to make money by short selling the declining market just got crushed. So it's a problem over there. We'll be talking about the economy a little bit more in the show. But I want to get on back to obviously the FISA memo and what is becoming out. Now there are more memos, there are more dossiers. It's really starting to unravel. And apparently Representative Louis Gohmert is preparing a letter to send to Chairman Bob Goodlatte requesting the House Judiciary Committee subpoena the transcripts from the hearings before the FISA court to find out exactly what was being said to the court by these various individuals with their phony Russian dossier. And there may be something in there that's actionable. Now, apparently, it's turned out there were two different versions of the Trump-Russia dossier. And on this second dossier, according to Grassley, apparently the information was literally handed to Christopher Steele by an Obama State Department employee routed through a Clinton crony. Now, the claim is that it all originated with an unnamed Russian source. But for all we know, the Clinton crony just typed it up in the back room and said, yep, this'll do it. This'll get rid of Trump. We'll get him with this one here. So basically, we're seeing in both cases, of both dossiers, it looks like this was all just being made up by Clinton's people. And they went with the dossier that was going to be more difficult to track down, the provenance on it. Story coming out of Information Clearinghouse, FISAgate, the plot to destroy our republic. And that's exactly what it was. A plot by the higher-ups of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to overthrow a legitimately elected sitting president. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going on. There was skullduggery by the Obama administration, by the Hillary Clinton campaign, by the DNC to gin up this memo in order to get some warrants to gather evidence on Donald Trump that would be admissible in a court of law. And they were focusing on Carter Page, because apparently he was supposed to be an informal advisor to the Russian government. He had business interests in Russia. So he was somebody they could say, we can find something. We can find something from this guy and we can get him to turn. And Carter Page was out there openly saying that sanctions against Russia are a mistake. And it's not illegal to hold that view. And in fact, I hold that view myself. All these sanctions are a mistake. They're dragging the world toward more war. Now, Carter Page was never a Russian agent. And interestingly enough, what it turns out is he's an undercover informant for the FBI. That just came out. Carter Page, who was supposed to be this focus of the Trumps linked to the Russian government, turns out to be a domestic spook. Now that's just amazing here. So the FBI wanted visa warrants to spy on Carter Page, and it turns out Carter Page was an FBI informant. Reminds me of when the FBI was trying to find out what the lyrics were to Louie Louie. It took 2 years of listening to the tape, trying to figure out what the lyrics were before somebody tapped them on the shoulder and say, you do know they're on file in the Copyright Office, right? We're going to take a moment here to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Mark Levin is basically out there. He was on fire and he was on talk show. Sean Hannity's talk show, and basically saying that Obama likely knew that Hillary was out there throwing all this money around to Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele. Basically, Hillary Clinton bought a warrant. That's what she did. Actually, more than one, to go after her political enemy. Like I said, this is shaping up to be the Democrats' version of the Watergate scandal. Now, if we take these dossiers at face value, that Christopher Steele and this unnamed Clinton associate were getting this information from Russian sources, then there's the collusion. It's not Trump and Russia. It's the Clinton campaign and Russia and the FBI, all in collusion against Donald Trump. That's the reality of what's going on. Now, Tom Fitton is out there asking, just when did Robert Mueller know the basis for his entire investigation was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee? Now, interestingly enough, the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost are still out there trying to say there's nothing in the FISA memo. In fact, it proves exactly what we've been saying. There was collusion. And I was reading these articles, and I didn't bother linking to them because they're just so much garbage. But obviously, the Washington Post and the New York Times are now playing to that segment of their readership that can't be bothered to read the actual memo itself. Because if anybody reads these stories in the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost, and they bother to read the actual memo, they will realize the degree to which the corporate media is currently lying to them. Go back to the original sources. Okay? Don't let the newspapers or the TV news or anybody say, this is what it all means. Go read the original source material. Read that FISA memo. It's all over the web right now. Decide for yourself what it says. Now, as you know, Adam Schiff has come up with the Democrats' version of the FISA memo. And by golly, you're going to send it over to Donald Trump. And by golly, he's going to make it public. And Adam is already dropping hints left and right that this memo focuses entirely on Trump. In other words, it's going to be a regurgitation of all of these baseless allegations they've been making for the last more than a year now. Trump and Russia, Russia and Trump, Trump and Russia. They stole it from Hillary Clinton, and they're not going to have any support for it. But what we're hearing is that this memo is being heavily written with methods and sources, the stuff that's not supposed to be declassified. And it looks like what Adam Schiff is trying to do is to force Donald Trump to redact portions of the memo that reveal sources and methods so that he can then say the redactions are political. He's got something to hide. It's a setup. He's guys played dirty. Apparently, because of all the dirty playing, Trump's lawyers are now saying that absent an actual subpoena, Trump should not talk to Robert Mueller. And I agree with that, because they're just out to get Trump. They're not interested in the facts. They're not interested in the truth. They're not interested in fair play. Mueller's strategy is to goad Trump and get him angry and get him to say something that can be construed as linking the firing of former FBI Director James Comey to the Russia investigation. And at that point, they can gin up an obstruction of justice charge. Meanwhile, lawyers for General Mike Flynn are going back to court asking for the case against him to be completely dismissed because of the FBI and Department of Justice corruption. Because again, Michael Flynn was basically caught up. It was entrapment. He was set up. Okay, we're going to grab a phone call here. Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. You were talking about Mueller. If he knew, Hillary bought that warrant. I'm not a betting man, but if I were to make a wager, I'd put maybe $1,000 down that he knew the entire time that Hillary funded the dossier.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, this is all a deliberate plan. It's not just a bunch of people going after Trump all on their own, and it just happens to coordinate wonderfully. It looks like former FBI Director James Comey was basically running this whole thing. And so, yes, Robert Mueller knew exactly what was going on and when.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said it the other day. I asked the questions, when did Obama know? And when did he know it, and how did he know it? And I think he knew all along. Comey has been shilling for Hillary ever since the days of when he was in that bank on the board of that was laundering drug money for Hillary. All of them are dirty. I mean, you have Mueller's a dirty cop, Comey's a dirty cop, McCabe's into it too. When are these people? My next series of questions are: when are these people going to be fired, and when are they going to be prosecuted? Because this is definitely trying to overthrow an elected government. You love Trump, hate Trump. You don't do this, though.
Well, it's not a question of what they're doing to Donald Trump. It's what they're doing to the nation and the American people, and that's why we should all be angry. This is an attack on what makes America, America. It's an attack on our freedom and our right to choose our own leaders. It's an attempt to bring us down underneath a dictatorship with pretenses of democracy, and nobody should settle for that.
No, not at all. Absolutely. I mean, I guess the next series of questions are: do we just sit back and keep pushing the word out? And because I feel like you feel this is going to topple over. I mean, the house of cards is so flimsy, and the cards are just falling off. I mean, do we just sit back and watch it, and then hopefully pick up the pieces, or is there something we can do besides, keep spreading the word and keep pushing, that these people are corrupt? I mean, what do we do next? What's the next, game plan?
We keep getting the word out. I mean, when you look at the stories that were in the Washington Compost and the New York Slimes trying to claim that the FISA memo actually supports the accusations against Donald Trump, clearly they're assuming that the vast majority of their readers didn't read the actual memo. So it's up to us to get that actual memo out there and say, you need to check for yourself, because the same newspapers that lied to you about Saddam's nuclear weapons are lying to you again. And you need to basically grow up and realize that the corporate media's job is not to inform you, but to keep you bamboozled and under control and useful for the ruling elite. Now, I like to joke about just sitting back and watching the U.S. federal government collapse. It is a joke, but I say it because I do not support the idea of a violent uprising or a new civil war, because the wrong people get killed in those kinds of things, and I don't want to see that happen. I don't really mean to imply we shouldn't be doing something. We should all be activists. We should all have blogs. We should all be out there with pamphlets and anything else we can think of to just go on out to the rest of the American people and say, you need to understand you are being lied to trick you into wars of conquest. And again, keep hitting that fact that Saddam Hussein did not have nuclear weapons.
Well, I mean, it's the same lie too. I mean, it's I had called in before and told you about McMaster's getting his 4-star, and then once he gets his 4-star, they're going to push him off to the Korean Peninsula for upcoming quote unquote events.
Yes.
Or activities. I think it was activity. I mean, which they're setting the agenda now. I mean, and they're actually trying to get Condoleezza Rice back in there, who's the progenitor of the Afghan and Iraqi war. So they're trying to set this up and going to try to pull this Korean War off, if that's what you want to call it. But I mean, I'm tired of being at war. I mean, 16 years. Let's rebuild
17.
our infrastructure. Let's rebuild our roads.
Yeah, I agree. We're in a wartime economy. They won't admit it, but we're in a wartime economy. Our infrastructure is crumbling, and the amount of money that Trump says he wants to devote to repairing some of that infrastructure is just a drop in the bucket. That's how far they've let this nation decay in their lust for war. Any kind of wealth or money that this nation has produced has been spent on the war machine.
Absolutely. My other question was, how are the stock markets today? How did that go today?
Well, they kind of bounced along and ended slightly up, but not enough to erase the declines of the last few days. And but it looks like this was a global sell-off. The Asian markets got pounded. The European markets got pounded, but obviously somebody successfully intervened to try and turn the American markets around. Here's the problem. They stopped it from plunging any further, but they didn't exactly convince everybody that the market is headed back up into the stratosphere.
Yeah, that's kind of what I kind of figured, kind of thought. I mean, could you call this a dead cat bounce?
It's a little more than a dead cat bounce. Looking at the volume on the Dow, I would say that there was definitely some massive buying going on, trying to use market forces to push the numbers back up again. In other words, again, they're rigging the market rather than working on the underlying value of the stocks.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I have for you today. Give Miss Claire the best, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day and great rest of your show.
Well, thank you very much. We certainly look forward to it. Weather Channel says we've got thunder showers coming in this afternoon, but then they've been saying we were going to have thunder showers for the last week. It didn't happen. Okay.
Yeah,
phone lines. We're
going to have a bunch of snow here.
Okay. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And we're going to get back in here to the news. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Something interesting we just found out. Adam Schiff's sister, Melissa, was married to George Soros's son. So there's a little bit of a family tie thing going on there, and that may explain why Adam Schiff, he of the bulging eyes, is just out there, just foaming at the mouth, trying to protect Hillary Clinton and the deep state. Let's take some more phone calls. John in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just want to say thank you for bringing up that point about the Democrats loading up their memo with all that stuff that Trump would have to redact. Because, and like you were saying about getting all blood, we can all blast Tucker Carlson with this stuff, anybody who listens to your show, and maybe get him, because everybody's watching him. They like his take on it. He's pretty blunt. But what I heard this morning when I was getting ready for work on Fox and Friends or something was the point that the sum total of the Democrat memo, even though it's twice as many pages, is going to say no dossier, no warrant. So the sum total, no matter what they throw at us, if that memo comes out, redactions, like you said, whatever their spin, the sum total will be, just like you said, Hillary paid for a dossier, and without that dossier, there would be no warrant whatsoever. And that's what we have to focus on, because all Christian talk radio, everybody is so mad that our republic is coming apart at the seams, primarily because you had Obama, you had a presidential administration and a crony Clinton spying on a presidential candidate, and that's just totally unacceptable. We, us Bill of Rights people, will not ever tolerate that, and all these bums need to be thrown out.
Okay, we have to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line. I'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And if you would like to help keep Republic Broadcasting on the air, and this is a really important time for us to stay on the air with all that's going on with the FISA memos and corruption coming on out, the postal address to send a check or money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, if you want to pledge to be a recurring subscriber, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, let's go on back to the phone here to John in Tennessee, and we're talking about the Democratic memo that they're coming on out with. Now, they've already had one memo that was specifically supposed to be a rebuttal to the FISA memo, and just basically full of falsehoods. And we've got a link at whatreallyhappened.com that goes to that one. But this new memo still has not been made public. Apparently, the House Intelligence Committee has sent it over to the White House. Trump has 5 days to either approve it for release or veto it or redact whatever's in there. But it doesn't matter what he does. I'm going to assume at this point it's loaded up with the same tired, phony stories we've been hearing for the last year, that Trump and Putin share wet, sloppy kisses, and they conspired to steal the election away from Hillary Clinton, who certainly deserved it. It was her time, so forth and so on. So if Trump just puts the memo on out with that, it'll be saying, see, he's confessed. He's admitting he's doing it. Or if he redacts part of it, they're going to say he's got something to hide. And if he vetoes it, they'll say he's playing partisan. He got set up. This is a no-win situation. This is how politics works. There's nothing he can do that's going to make it look good for him. And anything he does is going to be seized on by the FBI, the Department of Justice, certainly the corporate media, and the Democrats to scream, Trump must go, Trump must go. John, are you there?
Lost John.
We lost John. All right, well then let's switch over to Steve Elkins. Steve, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, what your last caller would have been saying is basically you have inadmissible evidence. The case would have been thrown out. That's what Ron McDonald would tell you, because the lead up to get the FISA warrants, the authorization to do the surveillance, was made under false pretenses and false evidence, and that was knowingly false, not just, we got it wrong. They knowingly knew it was false. So basically, it'd be inadmissible evidence. The whole investigation should be shut down immediately because they don't have the pretense to even keep going on with this thing.
No, they don't. They found absolutely nothing. And every one of those people who participated in the creation of that dossier and the application for the FISA warrants, they're guilty of violating Title 18, Section 1001, which can carry up to 5 years in prison time. When are we going to start seeing prosecutions of these criminals? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, another thing to add, I think it's a good time right now for Donald Trump to emphasize, or somebody on his behalf to emphasize, the deputy FBI director, Andrew McCabe, and his texts and the undermining and the backup plan in the event that Donald Trump won the election, how we're going to get this guy out. So the whole thing leads up to, and you can look back up high in the hierarchy where this all started from. Of course, it was Obama, Hillary, and a private corporation that decided we have to have a backup plan. So this whole thing was, it plays out like a freaking miniseries. In 10 years, this will probably be on TV as some movie. Maybe Robert Redford will pick it up and do it
5 years.
As is Watergate, the Watergate for the Democrats. But it's amazing that nobody's really emphasizing Andrew McCabe right now, and they should be. And also showing that the protection of, basically, I believe the FBI is part of the deep state, and that they're protecting Hillary, and the scrubbing of the servers and the deleting of the emails and all this. It all adds to the memo. It really does. It's ammo for Donald Trump if he uses it correctly. But the text from Andrew McCabe is clearly a plan to undermine and take out Donald Trump in the event that he wins. He needs to play that card.
Absolutely. And what we need to do is we need to frame this as the Democrats' version of Watergate, because anybody who is old enough to have remembered Watergate remembers just what a horrible scandal it was when it finally came on out. And you had a president of the United States using the nation's intelligence agencies to spy on and sabotage a candidate or candidates, plural, for the opposing parties. And this is exactly what was going on here. Obama and Hillary and Comey and Loretta Lynch were using the instruments of the American intelligence system and Justice Department to go after a rival political party candidate. And we're all aware they were spying on Donald Trump. Were they doing it also to Bernie Sanders? That's a question that needs to be answered as well. And I still want an answer to my question. Was Hillary Clinton selling U.S. secrets to foreign powers using that weak email server to deliver the goods and that Clinton Foundation to collect and launder the money? I want an answer to that question. I'm tired of waiting for it, and we need to get that. Stephen, do you have anything? Do you have more to share with me?
I would say it's always about the money. Follow the money trail. It's always about the money.
All
so
right,
Steve,
stay on the line. Got to take another break for commercials. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Steve Elkins. We're talking about the memo that the Democrats have put together to try and counter the FISA memo. Or to somehow discredit it or distract from it. And the word we're getting is that the Democratic memo mostly is an attack on Donald Trump. And it's going to repeat the same ridiculous claims they've been making all year about Trump-Russia collusion. And they basically have set Donald Trump up. There's nothing he can do that won't be used against him. If he goes ahead and releases the memo, they'll say it's a confession. If he redacts some of the methods and sources that Adam Schiff has reportedly put into the memo specifically to force Trump to make redactions, they'll say he's hiding things. And if Trump vetoes the release of this memo, they'll say he's playing partisan politics because he did release the FISA memo. It's a no-win situation. Anyway, Steve, you had something you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I agree. Right now they're in desperation. They're fishing. They're fishing very hard. It's funny because the GOP memo was, 4 pages, and I guess I heard that the Democrats, if it's released, the rebuttal will be 10 pages. It's like we've got one up on you. You did 4, we did 10. But you got 10 pages of really invalid reasons of why you broke the law. And then actually they did break the law, and that's what we need to keep emphasizing. The law was broken. And there were violations everywhere. You got Fourth Amendment violations. You got so many violations. This thing is stacking up. And there's no way they could spin this to say they had justification and they did the right thing. They got caught. I mean, they got caught, and that's it. Last question I have, it's off this subject here. I got a contact in Chicago. It calls me up and leaves me texts and asking me why the metal market, usually it goes the opposite direction of the Wall Street. If Wall Street goes down, then metals go up. Evidently, it did not. And his question was, how are they manipulating the metals markets, gold and silver? How are they manipulating that? When the market goes down, it should be going up, and it went down the same direction as the market. So how do you think they manipulate that?
I imagine that they probably just they can manipulate it by simply putting up a bunch of gold contracts, because the way the gold price is set is they blend the price of physical metal with the value of those contracts. Now, those contracts are being overprinted, they're heavily leveraged, and the reality is they're virtually worthless, but they're used to dilute the value of the existing real metal, and they do the same thing with the other precious metals as well. So when the market goes down, they're going to try and crush the metals to discourage people from leaving the stock market. Remember on the day when the big drop happened? And I was reporting on all these quotes coming out for people like J.P. Morgan saying, no, this is the time to stay brave and strong and stay in the market. And, they were really worried people were going to start emptying out their portfolios and either going to a savings account or into metals. And right now, Wall Street can't afford that. They're propping up that stock market with a lot of other people's money. And they don't want to run on the stock market because once it gets underway, there's going to be really no way to stop it. Even with the curbs, the trading curbs, every 7%, people will just wait until the curb is lifted and they'll barrel on out of there. I don't think the 500-point gain they did on the market today has convinced anybody this crisis is over. And again, if you remember 1929, okay, Black Friday was in October. In August, there had been a small correction. And then the market recovered and everybody took a deep breath and said, oh, well, that's over, nothing to worry about. And then, of course, October hit and it just all fell apart.
Right, all right. Hey, thank you, Michael. Appreciate that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to HB in FEMA Region 4. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, good show. I like your show. My original statement was going to ask about foreign aid, and I'm a big Ron Paul follower. And when he was asked when he was running, he said he was going to do away with foreign aid, and the reporter said, for which countries? And he said all of them. And I'm just, I'm sitting here and thinking, all this stuff. I hope something happens and some of these people get prosecuted like they need to be, but I'm so afraid that nothing's going to happen to them. And, I mean, nothing ever happens to these people.
Well, every once in a great while, something will happen to these people. Remember Charles I or Louis XVI or Ceausescu or Mussolini. I mean, every once in a while, they go a step too far and the world corrects itself.
Yeah, but our whole government needs to be taken apart and put back together.
I agree. I absolutely agree. It's gone totally corrupt. I have waited almost a quarter of a century for somebody inside the government, somebody with honor and ethics and morality, to stand up and say, this country has gone down a wrong path and we need to do something about it. But I think anybody who had an instinct to do something like that was eased out of the government a long time ago. Once a government goes corrupt, it goes all the way corrupt.
And they put 6 feet under for trying.
Yes.
But, well, I'll get off here. Good show. I like to listen to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, the reason for the foreign aid is rather complicated, and it's generally not what you are being told. Oh, we have to send these people money, they're starving. Usually it is either simply a bribe to the leadership of a country to listen more to the United States than to other countries. Very often it is a way of covertly funding certain operations by masking them as foreign aid. We're sending all this money to buy these people food and hospital supplies, and what's really being sent on over there are guns and ammunition. We saw that certainly in Syria. So it's a complicated issue. But yeah, in a world where governments learn to mind their own business, there's going to be a certain amount of charity that would be justified. But this constant stream of foreign aid, especially to countries like Israel, who just take so much money from the American people and then turn around and say, you guys do what we tell you, you don't tell us what to do. And the first thing we're going to tell you to do is give us more money. Getting on back to the news. Story out of the Daily Bell. Why trust in government is at an all-time low and why that is a good thing. And I would agree with that. You shouldn't ever trust the government simply because it is the government, and government is self-serving. Remember when the Founding Fathers were first creating this nation and they were coming out of Independence Hall? Somebody asked Ben Franklin and said, what have you created? And he said, a republic, if you can hang on to it. So even back then, they understood, no matter how perfectly they designed the new government, and let's be honest, Jefferson's experiment was daring and it was brilliant. They just understood the curse of political power is it attracts the very people who should never be allowed to have it. And once they get it, they'll do whatever they want with it for their own wealth, for their own aggrandizement, for their own power. It's a lot of work being in politics. I mean, Trey Gowdy's fed up with it as well. People who are willing to work that hard for themselves, very easy to find. People who are willing to work that hard and put up with that kind of friction for the greater good, you don't find quite as many of them. Some, Ron Paul, Cynthia McKinney, for example. But what we have today in this country, with this powerful central government that is intruding into every single aspect of our lives, spying on us, controlling everything we eat, don't eat, medicines we take, medicines we're not allowed to take, was never what was intended by the Founding Fathers. What was intended for this country was a confederacy of separate sovereign states where you would have New Hampshire or Massachusetts that basically stood on equal footing with other nation states around the world. like France and Great Britain. But these small sovereign nation states on the North American continent banded together for the sake of mutual commerce and mutual defense with a weak central government whose only job was to arbitrate disputes. That was the original blueprint. And we've lost all of that. That central government, that Sodom on the Potomac, has just grabbed all the power and wealth to itself. And looking at their example is one of the reasons why I'm opposed to a central planetary government, a global government, a new world order. So anyway, this article, why trust in government is at an all-time low, and it is a good thing because you should be skeptical. Earlier in the show, I was talking about how the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost are writing out propaganda on the assumption their readers aren't taking the time to go on out and look at the facts for themselves. That's their first failure as an American citizen, to not be checking everything you're told. Going back to Thomas Jefferson, he said the highest duty of every American is to keep themselves fully informed so that they can make good choices. You're not fully informed just by watching TV. You're not fully informed just by reading a newspaper or turning on the car radio to the CBS Radio News Network if they're still around. You're fully informed by going out to multiple sources and finding it for yourself, because anybody who's going to hand it to you is being paid to do so for less than honorable reasons. Now, apparently there's something going on over at Newsweek. Apparently, yesterday, there was a huge shakeup where a lot of the top management was basically kicked on out and the staff sent home. They don't even know if they're going to be paid or if Newsweek is going to shut down. But apparently, there's an ongoing investigation from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office regarding the company's finances. And the editor and second editor who got let go, Katz and Saul, had written a number of articles basically investigating the Newsweek Media Group, which is the parent organization of Newsweek and IBT. So something's going on over there. Corporate media is not doing very well. Let's take some phone calls. Roxanne in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Roxanne,
Hi.
There you are.
Hi, sorry about that. I guess I didn't hear the buzz or whatever. Anyway, on February 1, the Rothschilds, sold off like 31% of their...
Market down.
Yes, because we don't know who all... I mean, for some reason, Rothschilds are selling off a lot of stuff lately. And, they probably are doing it constantly, but does it get written up is the question. But and all the big boys and gals are all doing the same. So,
well, let me give you a hypothetical. Let me give you a hypothetical, okay? Let's say somebody with a fortune the size of the Rothschilds or of a Soros, and they've got a huge stock portfolio, and the stock market is soaring, and all of a sudden they dump their portfolio and they cash it out at the elevated price, and the market goes way, way, way down. Then they can buy back in and own the same amount of stock they had before, but for far less money. And they've made a huge amount of profit. And because they're buying back in, that will drive the market back up again.
Right. That's been done for, as long as I can remember.
Yes.
Yes, I agree 100% on that one. That's typical. But I'll let you get back to your show. Thank you for my time.
All right, thank you very much here. And we're going to take another phone call from Philip in FEMA Region 3. And aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Just a little appreciate Roxanne's reference to the Rothschilds as the Rotten Childs. That was rather appropriate.
Yeah, I like that.
But the first time I heard anybody use it like that. But anyway, real quick, that was a bombshell you dropped about Mr. Page being a undercover FBI informant.
Yeah, apparently he was an informant for them, which raises the idea of why the FBI felt they had to spy on him.
Well, that could probably be the reason why they used the designation in their FISA request for, what was it, Title I instead of the 702 or something like that reference. The Title I refers to foreign spy.
Yes.
Whereas the 702 is, yeah, so, that might be the reason why they were able to finagle that. But anyway, I think it puts a wrinkle in their plans. Here's one of the white hats that they're pursuing with their illegal FISA.
Well, basically, what it comes down to is they went before the FISA court with this dossier and said, this is evidence that there's some form of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and we need to find out what it is. And that provision for 702 says that you're intending on spying on a foreign source, but you're allowed to catch the American side of the conversation as well. And because Carter Page had all these Russian contacts, they basically got him to wiretap his phone to see if he was saying anything that they could use against Donald Trump. But again, I think the time has come for the FISA judge to stand up and say the warrant is invalidated. It's rescinded. It was based on fraudulent information. Fruit of a poison tree, as it were. And without that warrant, everything that's been collected by Robert Mueller is no longer admissible in a court of law. He doesn't have a case. He didn't have a case anyway. He's found nothing about collusion whatsoever.
Yeah, you and I know that, but I think we have a problem because Republic's got an article on their homepage about the there's a judge on the FISA court that kept the memos of Comey classified, so it seems like there's possibly a conflict right there.
Would sound like it to me.
That article? Yeah, so you got the FISA court, one of the FISA judges providing cover for Comey with his memos, keeping them classified, while at the same time granting the authorization for the spying on, the authorization of that surveillance there.
Yes.
But anyway, let me ask you real quick about this too. QAnon. Jerome Corsi did a breakdown of about a week ago, I guess, about QAnon, and he revealed some interesting stuff in there. I am opposed to the concept of martial law, but apparently all this talk.
Okay, Philip, we need to put you on hold.
Okay.
Don't hang up. We're going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Philip from FEMA Region 3, and you were starting to talk about QAnon and something about martial law.
Yes, Michael. In a video, it's on YouTube, Jerome Corsi, Secrets of QAnon. He made a cake. Corsi covers the fact that QAnon is making a case that because these deep state slugs were talking about assassination or violence against the president, it was implied apparently, and they said that triggered the military intelligence to get involved. So that would lead to a scenario where martial law would be imposed on a temporary basis to round up these slugs like Rosenstein and McCabe and Yates and all of these people. And I haven't looked or researched it. Is there a constitutional provision or a U.S. code that talks about this, that they can do that?
No, in fact, except for the Marines, the regular military is actually forbidden to engage in any law enforcement actions on U.S. soil. And they wouldn't need to anyway. I think declaring martial law and a national emergency is a bit of overkill, and you're going to trigger a panic among the people. And then you're going to have to deal with that mess as well. All you need to do is make sure that all of the airports and shipping terminals are on the lookout for these individuals you want arrested, and just start hunting them down. If they can't get out of the country, sooner or later, somebody's going to find them. Track them on their cell phones, track them with those cameras that recognize your face as you drive along the freeway.
Absolutely. You turn their system that they created for me and you against them.
Yes, exactly.
But on a lighter note, you were talking about the SpaceX launch today. You were talking about NASA. I recently saw that movie, The Martian. Did you see that?
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. You know, how they had to do things on the fly and you know, use their scientific backgrounds and everything to figure out, you know, how they were going to get this guy back and everything. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's how space works. That's how it works. Even back, you know, when I was there, you don't try and make everything happen all at once. You solve one problem, then you solve the next, then you solve the next, then you solve the next. And when you solve enough problems, something amazing happens. You go to Mars.
Well, well, I trust we'll use the same procedure to get these deep state criminals and bring them to justice. And like this article on Republic's talking about by Marty, I forget his name, but he's saying that these treasonous slugs need to face the death penalty.
I don't know about the death penalty, and I don't want to go to extremes here right now, and I still am not convinced that the word treason legally applies, because treason is defined as giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war. What the Comey, Loretta Lynch, Hillary, Obama were doing definitely comes under the heading of rebellion and sedition. And they are in violation of Title 18, several sections. They should go to jail. Okay. Anyway, Philip, thanks an awful lot. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm trying to keep tabs on what's going on with Falcon Heavy, which had a spectacular launch this morning. And the two side cores came back to Cape Canaveral, and they landed like right at the same time. Couldn't have been more perfect if it was a visual effect. But we're still not hearing anything about that center core that was supposed to land on SpaceX's drone ship in the Atlantic. The last that we knew was smoke obscured the camera view, and then the feed cut out from vibrations on the deck. Now, given how much time has now passed, basically an hour, I think if the core had landed successfully, we probably would have gotten word. I am presuming that SpaceX can afford a satellite phone for that drone ship to communicate with the mainland. So we'll wait and see, but the longer we go without any news, this is definitely a case where no news is not good news. So we'll keep an eye out. I hope for the best for them. Apparently some Russian pranksters spoofed Adam Schiff. They called him up and basically said that Putin has naked blackmail pictures of Trump, and we think maybe if you go here or talk to this person, you can get him. Apparently, Adam Schiff had his staff calling all over Russia trying to track down these imaginary photos of Donald Trump. Oh, my. Oh, my. Desperation on the cusp of madness. All right, let's talk about the war zones, because we got a lot of stuff going on here. Over in Syria, the YPG is sending a large force to combat the Turkish army in Afrin. And apparently a large convoy was filmed in Afrin overnight on the 6th, over 100 vehicles, including buses. The total number of fighters in the convoy is between 1,500 and 5,000, although experts are saying more likely it's about 2,000. Here is the problem. You've got Americans in there. You also have Canadians. So Syria looks like it could really blow up into a multiple direction war. Syria wants the U.S. out. Russia wants the U.S. out. Turkey wants the U.S. out now that they're supporting the Kurds. The U.S. those U.S. soldiers may be sacrificial lambs. They're being set up to literally be crushed on three sides by hostile forces, at which point Trump would have his excuse to say, we need to go back in there and show those people who the boss is. Okay, Donald, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. We ran out of the desert camo BDUs, but here's a day-glow orange jumpsuit left over from the CIA's torture centers watch your head climbing into that transport plane, and we'll call Putin, Assad, and Erdogan and tell them that you are on your way to whip their butt all by yourself. Now, Erdogan is again warning the U.S. should leave Manbij in Syria and pledging that after Turkey has cleansed it of the Kurdish forces, they will return it to the true owners, which we're assuming means Syria. Of course, with Erdogan, we can't really be sure. And apparently up in Damascus, somebody attacked the Russian trade representative building with a mortar attack. And nobody was hurt, but the building itself is very heavily damaged. Now, I wonder who would do a thing like that against the Russian trade representative. I don't think it was Turkey. I don't think it was Syria. I don't think it was the Russians. Story out of FortRuss.com, again, showing how everything's just getting messed around the world. Right now, British, American, and Canadian advisors are arriving in Donbass. And basically, from February 5th to the 9th, a delegation of the U.S. military will join the British forces. They will assess the expenditure of funds that Washington has allocated to the Army. And so something's brewing up there in Ukraine. Story coming out of Jerusalem Post, Hamas believes war with Israel will break out in the coming days. No surprise, we know that every 2 or 3 years, Israel just gets this itch. And they'll have one of their agents fire a bottle rocket over the fence from Gaza into a dirt lot in Israel, and they'll launch a massive attack. The difference this time, of course, is there are some 2,000 American troops in Israel right now, supposedly for this military exercise simulating an attack by thousands of missiles hitting Israel, which doesn't sound like a practical scenario. If you've got that many missiles coming in, knowing the cycling limits on Patriot and Iron Dome, there isn't really much you can do except hop in a hole and pray. But apparently Hamas and other Palestinian organizations believe there's a 95% chance Israel will launch a war as part of an IDF exercise in southern Israel in the coming days. In other words, the drill is a cover. We're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Now, as you know, Donald Trump angered Palestine and pretty much the rest of the Middle East with his arbitrary declaration that he recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, even though that's not what the United Nations says. And the Palestinians said, wait a minute, we're upset. And Trump said, well, how dare you be upset? We're cutting off all financial aid to you, and that will teach you a lesson. Well, what have I been saying happens every time the U.S. government throws its weight around? It drives potential allies away. And so Japan has just announced that they officially recognize the state of Palestine, and they are going to increase their financial aid. So the U.S. just got itself kicked out of Palestine. Palestine is pivoting toward Asia. Our foreign policy, it's idiotic. The only thing it's got going for it is a whole bunch of things that go bang and cause people to bleed to death. Apparently, Israeli bulldozers are destroying water lines that supply Palestinian-owned lands in the northern Jordan Valley area. Apparently, they didn't even bother with any kind of a pretext. They just sent in the bulldozers and wrecked the water mains. Now, a little bit of good news. Apparently, South Korea has now granted North Korea permission to start sending people for the coming Olympics. And apparently a 140-member arts troupe from North Korea is on its way to South Korea. They're traveling by ferry, and they're going on for part of the Olympic-related cultural events that are going to be happening. And North Korea has also notified the South the ship will serve as lodging for the artists And that's apparently a move to keep everybody apart. But it's good they're at least making the effort to try and say, you know, this has come down. It's gone on too long. Now, on the other side of the discussion, Breitbart is reporting that China has moved 300,000 troops closer to the North Korean border. And the reason for that is supposedly that if the U.S. attacks North Korea, there will, in all probability, be major refugees surging across that border. The way all the refugees that were in the Middle East and Africa and the countries that the U.S. is bombing down there have now flooded into Europe. But in this case, George Soros doesn't want to support North Koreans surging into China. China doesn't want them, and so they're enforcing their borders. And apparently it's not just 300,000 troops, defense batteries, artillery, and aviation to make sure that China's borders remain secure. And that is China's right to do so. Okay. Now, apparently, the director of Germany's domestic intelligence agency is accusing North Korea of using their Berlin embassy to acquire and smuggle parts for their missile and nuclear weapons programs. And the Germans are basically saying that there are procurement activities carried out from the embassy that they think, they believe, they assume are done with a view to the missile program. And so they're pointing the finger. Maybe, maybe not. One of the things North Korea needs to get their hands on for nuclear weapons is Cratron switches, and those are very tightly controlled. I'm trying to remember that producer in Hollywood who admits he was also a spy for Israel. Well, anyway, he got caught smuggling Cratrons to Israel as well. Now, the U.S. Air Force's F-35A fighter squadron is currently based at Kadena Air Base, Japan, and apparently it's been flying at a relentless pace since the squadron's aircraft started to arrive at the base in late October. They're looking at 1,000 flight hours and 500 sorties, and apparently an average day consists of the 12 F-35 aircraft flying between 12 and 14 sorties per day. Sounds like one flight a day, maybe a little more. And apparently the planes are suffering malfunctions. They're losing body panels. And apparently the maintenance crews are literally working around the clock to keep the planes ready to fly. Get the bondo. All right, as we mentioned earlier in the show, today the stock market was very volatile. If you looked at the actual chart of the Dow Jones, a lot of action up and down. And struggling to stay out of the red. And then, of course, toward the end of the trading day, huge surge in volume, huge surge in buying. The market ended up about 500 points. It's still way down, though, off its top. And so I do not believe that today's gain is going to cause everybody to relax and say the happy times are here again. And as I pointed out, back in 1929, before the big crash in October, there was a little crash in August. And they went through that, market recovered, everybody said, okay, we're fine, out of trouble. Then October came. So we're not out of the woods yet. I don't think this is over yet. Just pumping more money in doesn't fix the underlying problems that make this market delicate and fragile. Now, my opinion is it's getting ready to crash and they can't stop it. There are other people with other opinions. Over on thestreet.com, Peter Schiff, CEO of Europe Pacific Capital, told The Street that the Federal Reserve may secretly want to basically take the market down and slowly start to get it out of that overvalued area, which would be a good idea to do. The problem is you're going to see a lot of people who think they're rich because their stock portfolios, their 401ks, and they're going to get very unhappy when that value starts to come off of it bit by bit by bit. Apparently, Sean Hannity is blaming Obama for the market whoopsie. The Democrats, of course, are blaming Trump for it. But the problems with our stock market, the problems with our economy, don't go back to a single president. Trump's only been in office for a year. He's off the hook. Yeah, Obama made some bad choices. So did W. So did the Clintons. So did George Herbert Walker Bush. This administration after administration after administration of pandering to the Wall Street money junkies and basically changing the laws so that they could play their games, deregulation, championed by people like John McCain, is why the markets are unstable. And the way Wall Street operates today is just so far removed from what was originally intended. Like the Founding Fathers, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Those are good ideas, and they can be made to work. The original concept for Wall Street was a good idea and could be made to work. But over time, it's all become bastardized. It's all become warped and spun to serve special interests. It's all become more rackets. We're the United States of racketeering. Now, over the last couple of years, we have seen so many iconic companies hovering at the edge of collapse, or they're already gone. Companies that almost seem like they're part of history. You grew up knowing these companies. This was a name that was always there and always going to be there, and all of a sudden they're in trouble and they're disappearing. And so now there's a story here basically saying that General Electric may go out of business. They've been trying to cut back and sell off and slow down, and their GE's debt burden, most of which came from their failed venture of GE Capital. They wanted to get into the lending business. And there's a lesson there. Stick with what you know. But apparently they're not going to be able to retire their debt, and they may be driven into involuntary bankruptcy. And GE's been here forever. They were founded by Thomas Edison. And you had Westinghouse. It's founded by George Westinghouse, who established alternating current as the standard. Now, Westinghouse has already filed for Chapter 11. So these are not good signs for our economy when major corporations like this fail. And getting on back to GE Capital, that was a mistake. It's very tempting when a corporation becomes very successful doing something, they want to diversify, and they get off into other areas that they really don't know, and that can be their downfall. One of the companies that used to represent the best that America could do was the Hewlett-Packard Company. And Messrs. Hewlett and Packard had a very simple motto, and it was stick with the knitting. In other words, they were engineers. They stayed with the engineering. They didn't go anywhere else, and they produced some of the finest calculators and laboratory instruments in the world. Then they left the company, and new management came on in that wanted to diversify and, hit the consumer market, and they almost lost the company. All right, let's take a phone call here from Charlie in Los Angeles. Aloha, Charlie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I had technical analysis, but I just wanted to ask you a quick question quickly, and then I'll get to that. Was alternating current invented or discovered?
It was basically invented because there's nowhere in nature where current electricity exists in any kind of abundance. There's static electricity, obviously, lightning, rubbing your shoes on the carpet and everything. But the idea of being able to stimulate electricity going through a wire is definitely an invention. And when Edison started General Electric, he favored a direct current system. It was very, very simple. And he was trying to get the company off the ground. Then Westinghouse, aided by Nikola Tesla, who Tesla actually worked briefly for Edison. They didn't get along. So he went to work for Westinghouse and said, alternating current is actually better. It's safer. It carries a much longer over long-distance wires with less loss to heat and line loss. And more importantly, you can make a transformer with alternating current that can change your voltage and amperage at various places along the system. That's something that you cannot do with direct current.
Yep. One quick comment, and I'll get to my technical analysis. Carly Fiorina, who was head of the most successful, sophisticated electronic company in the world, couldn't have said that any better. You wouldn't know she don't know the difference between direct and alternating current, but she was CEO of the biggest company. Anyways,
well, let me tell a story with you. Okay, let me tell a story with you. When Claire and I first moved here to Hawaii, and I was working on Final Fantasy, and we decided to set up our own little production company, mostly focused on Claire's music. Because I had had such wonderful success with Hewlett-Packard equipment in my NASA days, we went with Hewlett-Packard equipment. And what we got was absolute crud. And I'll give you an example. Obviously, we were delivering product for like local radio commercials. We were doing radio ads for a while. We would deliver on CD. And the CD burners that came with those Hewlett-Packard computers, they would burn out in just 2 weeks. And we're on an island. It took forever to get a warranty replacement sent to us. We literally had to buy extra CD burners and keep them on hand. And that was when Carly Fiorina had decided to value engineer the company. And Hewlett-Packard took a real bath at that point. They're coming back now. But yeah, we almost lost our business going with Hewlett-Packard equipment when Carly Fiorina was in charge. Anyway, Charlie, stay on the line. We're going to take a short break, and I'll come right back to you for your technical analysis. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Charlie in Los Angeles, and you wanted to share with us your technical assistance.
Yeah, I'll make one more quick comment about Carly. She got rid of the profit-sharing program for the employees while she was there. Now, technically, Max Kaiser had a show a couple days ago, and he was showing the graphs of the dollar index and the interest rates, and they look almost exactly like they did from January of 1987 and January of this year. Mm-hmm. Now, whether that means anything, these people control these crashes, I think, to a certain extent. But if interest rates on the international market become more attractive to put your money there, the Fed doesn't have anything they can do about that. But in 87, the Fed was creeping up interest rates. In 2006, they were creeping up interest rates, and now they're creeping up interest rates. So, it's something to talk about, whether it means anything. But if this does start to slide, there's some heavy-duty rigging on this market. You take a look at Amazon is trading 100 times forward earnings. So anything that pays a good, reliable income, like 4%, just 4% on a bond, the money will come out of that market like you can't believe.
Okay.
So, anyhow, that's all I got to say for today. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You're right. The historical parallels are definitely there. And again, I don't think we're out of this thing yet. I don't think it's over at all. All right. We're going to switch to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. And I called to talk about something else, but just wanted to remind everybody that, remember a couple of years ago, I know you remember this, Mike, when they were about to vote to audit the Federal Reserve and the market dropped by 1,000 points?
Yes.
Remember?
I remember that.
Isn't it odd?
The Federal Reserve was fighting a full audit, and they even came out and said that if you try and do a full audit, the economy will crash.
Right, and remember they said that somebody made a wrong key entry that dropped it, but nobody was ever held accountable. Nobody was recompensed for this mistake. But just the media, we already know, sides against Trump, right?
Yes.
The media, MSNBC, all the alphabet stuff, CNN, all that stuff. The banks, I would tell you, probably side against him as well. At least they're more likely to be with somebody like Hillary, who's completely owned by them. But I wanted to say, you mentioned earlier, talking about all the stuff in the Middle East, about how completely, without any sort of logic, our foreign policy is in the Middle East.
Yes.
And I wanted to make the point that it's that way because it's not our foreign policy. It's Israel's. And we've been carrying out somebody else's foreign policy for the last 50 years anyways. And of course it's disjointed. And of course it makes no rhyme or reason, except that we're trashing all of Israel's neighbors.
Yeah, but we're doing it so badly.
Else.
We're doing it so badly. That's the issue. I understand Israel's influence over our foreign policy. My issue is that when foreign policy is being carried out, it's all very short-term thinking. It's not carefully planned out. It's just kind of a, let's get some of the boys and go on over and rub these other people out kind of attitude. There are a bunch of cowboys over there at the State Department right now.
Let me flip one more thing on that I can tell you this with authority, and I'm ex-military.
Yes.
I can say this with absolute authority, that the U.S. is deploying Air National Guard units to the Baltic republics. It's going on right now.
Okay. That's serious.
Michael, that's with absolute authority.
Okay.
So I know people being deployed. So at any rate, that's alarming to me. You don't normally deploy Air National Guard overseas, and the Baltics, I know which one, especially, or at least one of them, anyway. But I don't want to say to narrow it down. But it's a little alarming that they're doing that. And you had an article in your on what really happened. I believe that Russia is deploying more ballistic missiles to Kaliningrad, which is right nearby.
Yes. Everybody's arming up. There's no way around it. Everybody is arming up.
Yeah. And now we understand why that is. So, anyways, it's very scary. It's very scary. So, Mike, what do you think is going to happen? What's the next step with the FISA stuff?
It's a fist fight, and what's going on is we're going to see the Democrats and the Republicans fighting against each other, and the Democrats' only hope is to try and make it look like it's a partisan battle and keep people from thinking about the actual facts and the letter of the law. And that's why it's incumbent on us in the independent media to get the other side of the story out there. Anyway, we got to take a break for more commercials. I got to fix something here. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And following up on the Falcon Heavy, the official word is the center core is unaccounted for, which I think is SpaceX's for it missed the ship. And already somebody has put up an ad on eBay. Brand new listing, one center core, F9H compatible, may be wet. Check out my other listings. And let's be honest, it's a major success. Even though they lost the center core, this is a major success. So, and seeing that the side cores come down and just land like in formation, that was amazingly impressive. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? I wanted to talk about the economy, but first I want to talk about a few of your listeners yesterday called in about Iran. The reason they got all that money from Obama is because that was the money that was put from the sanctions that was seized, that was in our banks. All that money was Iran's money anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was basically it. They basically froze Iran's assets, and when Obama unfroze them and sent it back, everybody tried to say it's like the U.S. is just giving Iran money. It was their money to begin with.
I'm trying to figure out, what did Iran do?
They refused to bow down.
Fly planes into our buildings along with Israel and Saudi Arabia?
No, they just refused to do as they're told.
Yeah. Did Iran drive over people in New York and Europe and hack people up with machetes, the Wahhabis from Saudi Arabia?
No.
I don't know why all this hatred of Iran, Mike. What's the hatred?
Because they refused to have a private central bank. They refuse to live in slavery to the bankers, and that makes them dangerous.
But there's just a hatred for Iran not hatred from your listeners, but they're just falling into that trap of fakery. Iran didn't do anything. Iran is not the problem. The problem is your own government.
Iran is a target because Israel wants all large nations in the Middle East broken up and balkanized so that it will be the top dog. And Iran is still selling their oil for currencies other than the dollar. They refuse private central banking. They won't do as they're told. And that's what makes them a threat.
But the problem is, Mike, Europe needs Iran. That's why they see that ahead of us. Iran is an economic superpower when it comes to bringing debt to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, we need to expand the debt. That's the problem with this country. It's a debt-based economy. If we don't deal with Iran, then we're finished because they're a ripe country to invest in. You know what I mean? Like, Saudi Arabia is not. They're not. You know, and Israel's a small percentage. Iran's a part of the world that you should be investing in but it seems just there's a percentage of people in this country, the elites, that just hate them because of Israel and other, of hegemony and Saudi Arabia, business partnerings or whatever. But
oh yeah, I mean there are way too many people in the world who say, well, if Israel hates them, then we have to hate them too, and we don't need a reason to do that. And we even have that here in this country. If our government is hating Iran, well, then we have to hate them too. No reason to understand why. If our government says we have to go and invade Iraq, well, then I'm definitely for that, and I don't need to know what the facts are behind the case. And these are people that Stalin called useful idiots.
And Mike, I wanted to switch gears with Trump and the economy. Remember when he ran, he said we're in a big, fat, ugly bubble. And then all of a sudden, 360 degrees, everything's great. The stock market's on the rise. We're still in a big, fat, ugly bubble. It's a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. When are people going to realize that Trump has no real control over the economy?
No, he doesn't.
Mike, the economy has been a wreck for before we were born. It's been a scheme. It's just but people need to realize Trump has nothing to do with the economy. He reads off the script just like they all do with the unemployment rate being low. We know that's not true. We're in a bubble. That means it's unstable. If you can tell from the last few days, which is easy to tell, it's unstable, the economy.
Yes.
There's no growth here. There's just no growth, Mike. Like, do you think this has to do with inflation? Like the way I can't say if they're playing with the economy because I'm not in that sphere of influence.
Yeah.
But dropping it down and raising it, does that have to do with inflation?
Well, inflation is basically controlled by the Federal Reserve. Hello?
I just don't understand. Like, what would cause that big drop? You know what I mean? Like, what was the reason? Like on Friday and then Monday.
There's a lot of different people have a lot of different excuses. Part of it was a concern that Yellen is going to raise the interest rates, and that's going to make it much more difficult for firms on Wall Street to borrow money at virtually no cost, throw it into the stock market to run the prices up, then sell off, return the money to the Federal Reserve with that small bit of interest, and keep the rest as profit. That was part of it. There was also, I think, some overlapping concerns about the sudden downturn on the cryptocurrencies because of the ban in India and moves made by the Chinese government. So, but again...
But it should have never been dropped in the first place, though, the interest rates. right? I mean,
yeah,
it should have been
absolutely.
free market.
Yeah, the only reason they dropped the interest rates was to try and get out of that 2008 mortgage-backed security meltdown by making it much easier for people on Wall Street to just borrow whatever money they wanted to try and buy the stocks and churn the markets back up high again. Because every president since the Clintons have used that Dow Jones Industrial Average as a political banner. You know, look at the huge number. I'm a success. And Trump fell into it too. He took credit for the soaring Dow, and then it hiccuped on him, and now he's being attacked for that.
Yeah, Mike, college debt, loan debt, it's a bubble. People's debt, it's a bubble. The housing, it's a bubble. People are living in tents because they can't afford the housing because it's overinflated.
Yes.
So we're headed for trouble, people. You know, I don't know whether to tell you to stay in the stock market or not. You know, I mean, it's like playing roulette at Atlantic City. At this point, you know, you're taking a chance, man. I mean, the house of cards, Mike, you know, house of cards, right?
Yes, it is. It really is a house of cards. And that's because there's no commodity base to our currency. It is not an honest monetary system, and it hasn't been for the last 100 years.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, Peter in L.A. was talking about they're deploying Air National Guard to the Balkans. That's been going on a long time. There's no cause for alarm. Really, they use them. They have Air National Guard in Kosovo. I guess we still have a deployment in Kosovo. Is that correct? I don't know.
I have to be honest, I'm not keeping track. I know that there was a report that came out 2 weeks ago. The United States has military forces in 3/4 of the nations on planet Earth. That is a lot of coverage.
Well, I'm ex-military also. I was on that deployment in Kosovo. I believe it's still there probably. It's a NATO deal in Kosovo where there's troops from all over Europe and everything. I think it's still going on. They had at that time, which was years ago, they had Air National Guard there just to transport the troops and everything else back and forth between Germany and Kosovo. So that the fact that there's Air National Guard over there in the Balkans, there always has been. But as far as the Koreans, they have to reunify. And here in the Philippines, there's many South Korean people come down here. They flock down here, I guess, to get out of the cold weather up there in Korea. And they're nice people. They just come down there with their small children, and all they want to do is play in the swimming pool and go home. And but they're greeting you can tell something linguistically about the people by the way they use their language. Most people have good day, like they say Buenos dias, guten tag, or something like that. The greeting in Korean is "Annyeonghaseyo." It means it literally translates "Are you at peace?" So then maybe that tells you something about the Korean people. They're interested in peace. They're not really a warlike people, despite their proficiency in martial arts. So hopefully they'll get together. The only solution there is
for anybody who's ever done martial arts. The whole point of martial arts is you are left alone, and you don't have to live a life of violence. Now, there's always going to be violent people, and unfortunately they get elected into a high office, but most serious students of martial arts understand the whole idea is to not have to get into a fight on the street, because your aggressor understands they're really going to get hurt. Anyway, Michael in the control room basically mentioned that, yes, the United States does still have a base in Kosovo at Camp Bondsteel.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, they have that. So anyway, I was just trying to shed some light on the whole thing about Air National Guard. I'll let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And the phone lines are now empty, 800-313-9443. And I'm trying to do all these different things at the same time. So let's get back to the economic news here. Somebody asked a question that actually does make a lot of sense. How does Twitter stay in business considering it has never turned a profit in 12 years? I think I have an explanation. And I think if you think about it for a few minutes, you'll understand that Twitter doesn't exist to turn a profit. Twitter exists to basically commandeer the communications of a large segment of Americans and make them available for analysis and surveillance. Apparently, one of the cryptocurrencies called Ripple has bit the dust. Apparently, they had a huge bubble, just tens of thousands, and imploded. We're still dealing with the issue out here that Hawaii passed a law that actually makes it very difficult to deal with cryptocurrencies. I was researching it today. I'm going to have to take down my little Bitcoin donate button because apparently it's illegal to have a cryptocurrency wallet here in Hawaii. And okay, Peter called back and clarifies, not the Balkans. He's talking about F-16s in the Baltics. They're close. They're close. All right. Getting on back here. Apparently, as you know, Donald Trump seems intent on getting us into a trade war with China. This is not a good idea. And apparently, China's response is that President Trump is showing an outdated Cold War mentality. And yes, he is. But then that's been the design objective of the military-industrial complex ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, all of a sudden we don't have an enemy. And the American people are saying, whoa, good, we don't have to spend all of our money building those ballistic missile submarines and those supersonic bombers and those holes in the ground filled with all those nuclear weapons. We can take back some of that money from the Defense Department, and we can build better schools and better roads and better communities for ourselves to live in. And, of course, there is nothing the military-industrial complex hate more than decent roads and decent schools and decent hospitals in the United States of America. And so they've been trying to gin up wars all over the place, and they wanted to bring back the Cold War. They've had symposiums on how do we get the Cold War going again. And yes, that's exactly the reason why we've gone from being friends with China and Russia back to being enemies. I recognize it all from the 1950s. Same lies, same agenda to basically scare the American people into sitting still and doing nothing when their loot produced by their labor is simply stripped off and given to the war machine to just have fun with. And they don't even know where it's going. They've lost all kinds of money, according to audits. All right, let's talk to James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I had an idea for surviving better in the early stages of an economic crash. I was thinking about Venezuela and what the stores began to run out of first and what they started importing from adjacent countries. And so I'm putting all my money into buying cases of single-use bathroom tissue. I figure before things get really bad, you could probably even trade some for ammunition, things like that. And I'm going to call this new currency brownbacks, of course. And should forget about cryptocurrencies. This will be the first cryptocurrency.
Ooh.
Anyway.
Ooh.
But anyway, that's all I have for you.
That's
I figured it was such a grim news
I'd
day.
say that's probably all you've got to say on the show today. All right. Well, listen, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to China and the trade war. Apparently, China has their equivalent of Amazon. It's called JD.com. And apparently they've decided they're going to take on Amazon in Great Britain as part of the trade war that seems to be brewing between our two countries here. Now, getting on back to the military-industrial complex, story coming on out about how apparently the Department of Defense Logistics Agency, just that one agency alone, has over $800 million in unaccounted expenses. In other words, the bookkeeping shows that $800 million came in and nobody knows where it went out. Gosh darn, it was here just a few minutes ago, I guess. Now, Rand Paul is out there basically saying that he wants to hold a hearing on government waste. And what has got his ire up right now is apparently the U.S. government decided to issue a grant of $500,000 for a scholarly study asking if taking selfies made people happier. $500,000. I think the fact that everybody does it, that the answer is very obviously yes. But obviously this academic grant is payback for some other political favor somewhere else, like maintaining the liberal agenda on the college campuses. Okay, we're going to take another break here for our words from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more phone calls and more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And this being a very dynamic news environment, I'm going to ask you to forgive me because I'm bouncing around from topics. And I want to go back to this issue about the dodgy dossier, the Russia dossier, because apparently Christopher Steele was supposed to be at a London courthouse where he was going to do a deposition in this multi-million-dollar civil lawsuit brought against BuzzFeed, which published a salacious and unverified Trump-Russia dossier. And they're being sued, and Steele is a witness, but apparently he didn't show up. And they're thinking that because of the criminal referral by the U.S. Senate, Christopher Steele may be heading for parts unknown. Although personally, if I were involved in the investigation, I'd be taking a good look inside Fort Marcy Park right about now. Because Steele can improve his personal position by making a deal and turning state's evidence, and that possibility is reason enough to get him killed. Okay, remember last week, a U.S. missile defense system failed to intercept a ballistic missile outside the Earth's atmosphere, and they completely missed it. It was run out of right here in Hawaii. China just pulled off the same test, and they succeeded. Let's get into Europe, immigration. The Hungarian Prime Minister is out there saying that the UN Migration Compact looks like it was copied from the Soros plan for mass migration. Well, yeah. And he's going on to say, Viktor Orban is going on to say, Hungary's had some rather bad experiences with NGOs, calling them bogus civil society organizations dealing with migration, and they all eat out of George Soros' hands. Now, over in Italy, former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is actually trying to run for another term in office. He was hit with scandal. He had to step down, but apparently there's a good chance he could come back and win. And he is pledging as his campaign promise to, upon winning office, deport 600,000 illegal immigrants from Italy. And basically Berlusconi said, rather than repeat platitudes about how diversity is our greatest strength, it's time for a return to sanity. I actually find myself in agreement with this gentleman. Over in Germany, apparently there's been a huge surge in small firearms ownership. And apparently, according to the German newspaper Handelsblatt, there's a growing demand for small firearms and other non-lethal weapons, including gas pistols, torch and stun guns, and pepper spray. And of course, Merkel's saying, what are they arming themselves against? There's nothing wrong here. Yeah, there is. It's been 2 years since Merkel accepted more than 1 million immigrants from the countries of the Middle East, and they have wrecked the place. And the German people are justly afraid. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And at this point, I think it's pretty obvious that they lost the center core of the Falcon Heavy. But again, I don't see that as a failure because they proved the concept can work. And again, think back to the early days of the space program. Rockets were blowing up all over the place. I remember one story that was relayed to me when I was joining NASA about how one of the biggest problems they had to deal with it was called Cape Canaveral at the time, it's Cape Kennedy now, was the wildlife. Because they'd go down into those trenches underneath the launching pads, the water trenches for the flames. there'd be a wildcat down there or something chasing the engineer back out. And of course, before any launch, there's a crew that goes around with shotguns to scare off the birds so the birds will not impact on there. So there's a movie called The Right Stuff, based on a book of the same name, and it's about the early days of the Mercury program. I don't know why they gave the visual effects to this person who was just shining lights through crinkled glass. It actually detracts from the movie. But part of the archival footage they have there is of those early missile launches and how often they did fail. So SpaceX is doing a really good job, and I wish them good luck. And I know this is space travel. It's not like just driving down the road to the local 7-Eleven. It is dangerous. It will always be dangerous. And that's just something that anybody who works in space or goes into space, you just accept that up front. Now, getting back to the issues of immigration, apparently over in Great Britain, there's a new political party claiming to draw their inspiration from Emmanuel Macron, and it's being launched. And it is basically a political party that is intending to reverse Brexit. And they are calling themselves Renew. And apparently they're getting advice and support from France, and my guess is probably from George Soros as well. Have you noticed this trend around the world to just say, we don't care what the voters are saying anymore. We want the European Union to remain together. We want Hillary Clinton as president. And if you voted the other way, well, then there's something wrong with you. Tensions are high over there. Story that came on out is apparently the Remainers are now sending death threats to Brexit supporters, including this one guy was 80 years old, and he got a letter, and inside it said, we're watching you, we know where you are, we're going to kill you unless you stop supporting Brexit. Real thuggishness here. Story out of Breitbart. Apparently, the BBC and Anglican Church elites are now attacking British Christians for wanting limits to immigration. And the Anglicans are out there claiming that Christianity demands support for open borders. Well, when I was younger, I read that Bible, and I don't remember anything in there about Christians supporting open borders. I do remember in several places where very unfriendly people coming across borders were very unkind to the Christians. And a couple of cases where the Christians going across somebody else's open borders was very unkind to them. Now, as you know, there's a big controversy over Donald Trump's moves regarding the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument. And he basically reduced it in size, and he's already out there taking some of these lands that used to be part of the monument and now opening them up for hard rock mining and other exploitation. And the Democrats are very upset. The United Nations is saying it's an affront to indigenous rights. It's a complicated issue because the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument was created by President Bill Clinton. And at the time, it was questioned whether it was a wise thing to do, because underneath the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument are some major deposits of low-sulfur, clean-burning coal. And you'd think the environmental wackos and the carbonazis would be happy about that. And because all of a sudden there was a national monument, American companies could no longer mine this clean coal. They had to buy it from mines over in Asia, which just happened to be owned by some of Bill Clinton's good friends. Now, the reason people question the legitimacy of the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument is that Utah's statehood agreement pledged all of that coal to support Utah's school system in perpetuity. So the instant the monument was declared, the federal government violated Utah's statehood agreement and, of course, made Utah's public school system dependent on federal funding and federal control. So I have mixed feelings about this. I hope somebody will remember that the proceeds from the coal that is being mined from under what used to be the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument is already earmarked for Utah's public education system. We're going to do a shout out to our honor affiliates just now rejoining our network. Now, here's an interesting little article out of Natural News, and it's basically saying that NASA scientists are saying that people are born creative geniuses, but it's the U.S. education system that locks them down, that dumbs them down. And we didn't need to go to NASA to learn this. I'm sure we all remember that our attempts to just see the world our own way got slapped on down. And there was a very famous musician many years ago, Harry Chapin. If you're my age, you remember him well. And he wrote a song called The Flower Song, about a little kid who, during art in class, wanted to draw all kinds of colored flowers all over the paper, and the teacher said, no, 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 neat little rows of red flowers on green leaves, you know, one after the other. And the whole song is about this kid just wanting to give free expression to his creativity, and finally, at the end, he just surrenders and just says, yes, flowers are red, green leaves are green. There's no need to draw flowers any other way than the way they've always been seen. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful song. So, yeah, it's one of the reasons why homeschooled kids do so well. They're not going through that experience of having their creativity crushed down. No parent crushes down a child's creativity. It doesn't happen. Okay. Story out of Hideout Now. Apparently there is a growing backlash to this Me Too campaign, and it is coming from women who are out there saying it's gone too far, it is really silly, it's just a bunch of women just clamoring for a few minutes of media attention. It is in many cases hypocritical, and it is grown so large it is actually obscuring some of the real issues women are having to deal with. It's a fad. And now women are coming back and saying, no, this is really too much. Been a major earthquake over in Taiwan, 6.5. No tsunami threat to us here in Hawaii. Now, as you know, there's been a big stink over this revelation that digital fitness trackers were showing the locations of workouts, including military bases and clandestine sites around the world. And this threat is not limited to Fitbits or other similar devices. Apparently, there was researchers showing mobile phones track their users through stores and cities and around the world, even when users turn off the phone's location tracking services, which is something I did because I'm private, but apparently the phone is still tracking me. And it can track us anywhere, including those top secret bases. Now, somebody actually put up a story saying that Fukushima has been completely deserted, and that signals the end is here, that life is about to end on Earth, because the map that was released by this athletic device didn't include any jogging trails around Fukushima. Well, common sense, people. I don't think Fukushima's been evacuated, but if you're not having to actually work there, I don't think you're going to be jogging around the remains of those reactors. You're going to get as far away as you can before you have your relaxed time. Think these things through. Now, there is a new cryptocurrency mining malware spreading through Android devices. Boy, am I glad I'm no longer having to deal with Android. It's called ADB Miner. It is a worm, and it is apparently exploiting one of the NSA tools that was leaked out onto the net. Bad news on Julian Assange. He went to court, or his representatives went to the Westminster Magistrates Court, and the court apparently has ruled that Assange's arrest warrant still stands, which means he's going to remain in the Ecuadorian embassy for quite some time. Now, Assange has been given Ecuadorian citizenship and diplomatic status. The only problem is, how does he get from the embassy to the airport to get on a flight out of there? Now, earlier, there had been strong indications the British court was going to say, yeah, we're going to let the warrant drop. But somebody apparently called somebody and said, no, keep him right where he is. And I guess the pressure is really starting to pile up on him because shortly after getting this disappointing news, there was a suspicious package delivered to the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And apparently it was filled with a mysterious white powder. They're still not sure exactly what it was. And a note indicating a death threat directed to Julian Assange. So they want to get him on out there. So let's see. Somebody just sent me. No, it's just an opinion. Let's talk about doctors. Let's talk about vaccines. Story that has come on out where basically there was this court case where regulators were literally harassing and publicly humiliating a doctor who was expressing concern about vaccine dangers. And apparently some of his accreditations were pulled, and they just really whooped on him for being a vaccine heretic. How can you not believe? Burn the heretic, burn the heretic. The doctor sued, and apparently he won his case. And a judge has ruled that these regulators who harassed and humiliated him will have to pay him millions of dollars in compensation, and I hope they are held personally liable for this. So, I mean, we see all these stories. Yes, the individuals will have to pay the money out of their own pockets. That's really good. But they're in the hot seat. And this whole situation with vaccines and how much damage they cause and how very often they don't work at all. I was talking with somebody earlier today about this flu that went around. And he was saying literally half their office was out. And they'd all had the flu shot. Looking at some of these headlines, family to receive $1.5 million in first ever vaccine autism court award. Why Japan banned MMR vaccine. Rockefeller Medicine Men, Medicine and Capitalism in America. And it's a book. It's available on PDF. Monsanto admits injecting glyphosate a hazard, but it is in vaccines. Abortion drugs discovered in Bill Gates vaccines, secret sterilization program discovered in Africa, and may I add, not for the first time. Big Pharma's medical research papers are total bunk. Hundreds were fraudulently ghostwritten by a PR firm called Design Right. Historical evidence that debunks the popular myth that vaccines eliminated childhood infectious diseases. And finally, another one about Bill Gates and neo-eugenics vaccines to reduce population. Now, story from Africa, there was this state-sponsored vaccination campaign. It was supposed to be typhus. And the pharmacy corporation that created the vaccine has now had their license suspended because apparently this vaccine sterilized 500,000 women. And apparently the Catholic Church was running a volunteer medical clinic. They got their hands on some of this vaccine and discovered it was contaminated with a hormone that can cause miscarriages and render some women sterile. Boy, you got to be careful what's in that needle before they stick it in you. Let's take a phone call here. Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. Good day. Yeah, Michael, first I want to talk about what happened with this football player, an Indianapolis Colt football player got ran over by an illegal alien.
Yes.
Deported twice. To me, that is, if that's not a signal to the United States what's actually happening with the illegal immigration, I don't know what is. And secondly, yeah, Michael, I was listening to Trump today talking about MS-13 gang members. He's over there with the woman. And according to what they were talking on the Fox News, there's 58,000 MS gang members in the United States. How is that possible to allow 58,000 MS-13 gang members in this country illegally and committing the crimes they're committing up in Long Island and all the stuff you hear? It's almost mind-blowing here.
They're a very brutal gang.
That's a battalion. That's a big battalion.
Yes.
Excuse me?
Somebody just opened the borders. The Democrats want the illegal immigrants, and MS-13 can be counted on to vote Democratic along with everybody else. All other considerations are subordinate to that agenda. The Democrats don't care if MS-13 is out there raping and robbing and giving little kids drugs to get them hooked. They just don't care.
Well, Michael, when Trump was talking about that, I watched it, and he was also mentioning it wasn't just MS-13. There's other gangs in this country that are people not even talking about in the media. I live in South Florida here, and I can tell you we have a big problem with gangs here. And there's a gang that particularly comes from one of the countries that Donald Trump says is an asshole.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure you can figure it out.
Yes.
And so they're a big problem here in South Florida, and they're all over New York too, I believe. And
yes, they
what
are.
Trump is actually doing is he's like Donald Trump saying today, shut the government down, you dirty Democrats, because you people literally are trying to destroy this country from within. And I was also looking at a Breitbart article about the wall. Well, they have this guy, I guess, who says now, I believe his name is Fisher, and he's saying he can build that wall for $12 billion with a road on top of it, a high road access on top of the wall, like the Great Wall in China. And I think that's a wonderful idea. And he said he can have the whole 710 miles done within 2 years. Well, I'm figuring you're giving Iran, what is it, Michael? They gave Iran $150 billion. And they're not, these Democrat swine don't want to give Donald Trump even $18 billion? What is going on? And you're bringing bundles of cash to Iran who want to blow us up with nuclear warheads.
Well, hold it. Tom, you're falling for the deep state propaganda. Iran does not want to blow anybody up. And they never had a nuclear weapons program. Iran is not a warlike country. They have not initiated a war of conquest with another nation in over 200 years. And so please don't fall for this idea that Iran represents a danger to the United States. It doesn't. It's the United States that represents a danger to Iran.
Well, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. I really don't know all that. I'll be hearing the propaganda media about Iran wants this and that. But I do know that they gave him a lot of cash. And I'm figuring, Michael, for $25 billion that Donald Trump could get the wall done, and then they have a guy come out on Breitbart saying they can do it for $12 billion. And I mean, it's just unbelievable to me that this is not being done. And it should have been done 30, 40 years ago.
Tom, I'm telling you why it's not being done. The Democrats are fighting this tooth and nail, and they're unfortunately being aided by a bunch of rhinos that they want the borders open, both because they can flood this country with illegal immigrants who are going to vote democratically. Second, it supports the New World Order agenda, and they don't care the fact that ordinary Americans are now having to deal with gangs like MS-13 and these others. They simply don't care. They just want those borders open. The only country that's allowed to have a wall right now is Israel.
Yes. Also, Michael, I can give you a little information to your listening audience. I had a brother who was working construction for years in California.
Okay, can you hold that story? Can you hold that story? We got to take a break for commercials. We're going to come right back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Tom in Florida. And Tom, you were talking about your brother was working in construction and that you had some insight you were going to share with us.
Yes, Michael. But before I do that, I did talk to my brother about an hour and a half ago. He was in Cape Canaveral, and he did see the rocket go off over there in Cocoa.
Yep.
And he said it was amazing. Elon Musk's rocket is fantastic. I wasn't there. He was there. He loved it. And it actually it proves you that the private, but Elon Musk can do a rocket like that. What happened with NASA? That's one of my other points I was going to get to. But it was amazing launch, according to my brother. But what I wanted to talk about him with, while I was talking with him, we were discussing a few things. I talk to him all the time. And when he was in California, he had to leave California in 1998, Michael. My brother's a block mason. He did brick and block all over California. He lived in Coast Base or Riverside and all that. And he told me in 98, it was so bad for a white American to be in the block trade over there in California that they were just quitting in droves. They were just basically walking away from the jobs because if you're going, and he told me now, if you're in California, you're not going to even get a job there because they pushed the wages so low when they flooded with all these illegals doing all this construction. And if you look at the construction trade, my brother ended up going to Carolina. He was in North Carolina till like 2010. he was working on the highway roads, and he ended up leaving that. And when he left, he told me it was down to less than 40% white Americans working in the highway industry, building the highways in the state of North Carolina. Now he's in Florida, and he's basically retired. But he was telling me all the stories of how the construction trade has actually gone to these minority groups where a white American doesn't actually have a chance of even getting these jobs anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what his perspective is, that a white man can, not a Trump's in there, I guess things have turned around a little bit because Trump's in there. But under Obama, it was horrible for, even with Bush Jr., it was like, forget it. If you're white, you're not going to get in the construction trade. And the wages were so suppressed, it was unbelievable, according to what my brother's telling me. And he just told me California was lost, like in the late 90s. California, you couldn't even get a job unless you were a minority in his construction trade.
Yes.
So I just wanted to share that with your audience because that's what's happened. And here in South Florida, I'm still working. And I can tell you, Michael, in the federal government agencies, you wouldn't believe what's going on here in the federal government agencies. It's amazing. Transit, solid waste, water, sewer. They're getting these great jobs. And if you want to get your government back, you need to start getting these government jobs to the majority of the people that are in the majority. Not the minority, the majority.
Well, what you need to do is you need to recognize we're being discriminated against, okay? And racism in reverse is still racism,
No doubt.
and we have to get just as angry about being discriminated against as any of these other groups. And we're facing an uphill battle because when black people are talking about their heritage, it's called Black Pride. When Hispanics are talking about their heritage, it's Hispanic Pride. When white people talk about our heritage, we're called racist.
Exactly. That's the point. Thank you, Michael, for bringing that up. That's the whole thing I've been trying to get through for a while. White America has got to stand up, and if they want to take their government back, they need to get these federal government jobs. They need to start saying, we're the majority, we're not the minority, and we're not going to take it anymore. It's like that movie. We're not going to take it anymore. We're the majority. We're going to be treated fairly, properly, and number onely. We're going to be treated.
Well, let's stop with equal. Let's stop with equal, because the reason we're in this mess right now is because those people who in the past had been discriminated against, they got to be equal, and then they said, let's keep going. Let's keep the momentum up. Now it'll be our turn. We'll be on top, and we'll be able to make them sit at the back of the bus. And that's not a permanent solution. That's just revenge, and it just keeps the hate and the violence going again. Dr. Martin Luther King had the right idea. You judge each other by the content of their character. And you take each on a case-by-case basis. There are good people, there are bad people. And you just make your decisions based on that. And you need to understand something else people don't understand. You're taught to be racist. Okay? Brand new babies don't care what the color of the baby next to them in the hospital is. It's something that you're taught. And you just need to unlearn it. Okay, Tom, we've got to take another commercial break here.
Nobody can say it better than you, Michael. Nobody can say that better than you. You were great.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words.
Early, Mike.
That's right, I'm still early. I'm still not used to the new clock. All right. So apparently, according to the story that I'm looking at here, pharmaceutical corporations are literally trying to use their PR muscle, their lobbying muscle, to prevent autopsies on children who have died after being given vaccines. And apparently there's a big stink down in the Philippines where the government paid something like $40 million for some very dangerous, clearly faulty jabs into children. And so there's a big standoff there. Okay, now we're coming up on our commercial break, and when we come on back, it looks like we got another caller waiting on the line, plus the rest of the high science and health stories. So now we'll take a break, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and again, getting on back to Falcon Heavy. There are still reports, there's nothing definitive about what happened to the center core. And I think at this point the assumption is it is lost, but I'm still seeing reports saying that, yes, it did land on the drone ship, but the drone ship is having communication problems. I'm sure we'll know for certain by tomorrow. I would love it if they'd hit all 3 for 3. Let's go back to the phones here. Lenny in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Thank you for taking my call, Michael. I want to speak to Tom from Florida. If he had been listening to Justin from New Jersey in his earlier call and about the money that was given to Iran, it's like you and Justin concluded it was Iran's own money. All right, and so for him to get upset about it, if he had done his own homework, he would have known that before he reacted to it. And I would like to give him some advice. Stop reacting, man. I said earlier in your show, do your homework. Don't just listen to what NBC, CNN, ABC, all the rest of the liars, what they're saying. Do your own homework, and you can come, if you're really looking for the truth, you can come to it, okay, using a variety of media. But anyway, as far as the stock market is concerned and the drop, I have my own theory on what's happening with this.
Okay.
If you remember, the last time the stock market acted like this pertaining to Trump was on election night. And wait for Trump, they had another screen beside that saying, look at the stock market is dropping. Okay, so what they were doing was trying to scare the people who had not voted in the Western and Midwest states to keep them from voting for Trump. If you vote for Trump, look at what's going to happen. The economy is going to crash. Now, I connect this to the Pfizer or the FISA memo. And
Before you go there, the reason that stunt about showing the market futures drop every time Trump won another state was because those people in the Midwestern Great Plains states, they don't own stock anyway. They don't care what happens to the stock market for the most part. It's not until you get out on the West Coast that people start paying attention again. That's why they didn't get any traction with that.
Exactly. They tried it, but it didn't matter to the people in the West, in the Midwest, exactly because they're farmers anyway. Okay, they live off the land. It doesn't bother them at all. Okay, but I do agree with you that was the thing. So what I'm saying now is the more Trump looks into the dossier, the deeper he digs, they're going to try and use emotion to scare the people all over again.
Yes, they are.
That's just my take on it. All right, for what it's worth. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call. I appreciate it. And, of course, the reason I got upset with Tom was he just launched right in this thing about Iran wanting to nuke us. And at that point, it's pretty obvious he hasn't really been paying attention to what we're talking about on this show or what we put up at whatreallyhappened.com. And he's fallen into this idea that the entire world is out to get the United States of America, when in point of fact, it's actually the reverse. It is the United States that is attacking all these other countries on the flimsiest of excuses, or sometimes no excuse at all. When you have U.S. Special Forces now in 3/4 of all of Earth's nations, that shows you who the aggressor is. And they're talking about going into North Korea. They're talking about going back into Syria. We know who the warmongers are. It's not Iran. Iran is a very peaceful nation. They want to be left alone to live their lives the way they want to live them. But because of all the oil they're sitting on top of, they became a target for the United States. And back in 1953, the CIA overthrew Iran's elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh, and they installed a Western puppet ruler, the Shah, a dictator, who kept the Iranian people terrorized with his secret police, the Savak, until finally in 1979 the Iranian people had enough of this, and they kicked the Shah out. And they set up their own country the way they wanted to run their country. And that was their right. And the United States is very unhappy about this because it sets a bad example for other countries that have been covertly regime changed by the United States, getting this uppity idea that they can kick their puppet rulers out and go back to running their own country. And that's a big part of what's going on in all these countries right now, whether it's Syria or Yemen or Libya. So let's see. Let's move on here. All right, getting on back to the news here. Boy, there's a lot of stuff coming on in. All right, finishing up with the pharmaceutical stories here. I'm just going down a list of things that show the arrogance and greed of these companies, and we're talking about this disaster in the Philippines where there was this vaccination campaign, and apparently it really harmed a lot of children. And this was the Dengvaxia issue. And apparently the pharmaceutical company was literally out there saying, no, you cannot conduct autopsies on these children who died. Just assume it was natural causes and only a coincidence that they died after getting our vaccine products. They had a major snowstorm in Taiwan to go along with their earthquake here. A lot of roads are being closed over there. And just when you think Hillary Clinton cannot get any more ridiculous, she has always been able to surprise us. So apparently, according to an article in Zero Hedge, Hillary Clinton is now out there claiming that climate change is sexist. And she's saying that in the developing world, climate change will force women to shoulder the responsibility of looking for food, finding firewood, and migrating livestock once all the grass has been transformed into a desert. And unsurprisingly, the future she described is an uncanny resemblance to the dystopian future depicted in the Mad Max franchise. Now, here is the question. What does Hillary think the men are going to be doing? Because certainly the history up until now has been that in more rural societies, it is the men who shoulder the majority of the burden of finding food, firewood, building a home, migrating livestock. This is complete nonsense, this idea that climate change is going to result in the women having to do all the work and the men just kicking back. Now, yes, there are occasionally men who are going to sit back and want the women to do all the work. But climate change has got nothing to do with it. I mean, this is ridiculous. She's out there saying that women will be the primarily burdened with the problems of climate change. It really is getting very, very silly. Now, talking about spacecraft, as you know, there's this very fun story. It shows about the power of amateur science. And there was a satellite NASA put up a long time ago called IMAGE, which stands for the Imager for Magnetopause to Aurora Global Exploration. It was launched in 2004 and presumed lost. But just a couple of months ago, an amateur astronomer, Scott Tilley, found its signal. He was actually looking, he's a radio astronomer, he was looking for the secret but failed Zuma satellite that was put up recently, and he found this other signal that nobody knew what it was. And finally identified it was IMAGE. NASA has now communicated with the satellite and verified it's actually working. So now they're looking for money with which to actually carry out the mission. And I think that would definitely be worthwhile, but great that they found it. One of the things that I think is a little bit of sad, when you're on a mission like that, like Viking, Voyager, whatever, there's that final moment when you shut down the command receiver, where you send a deliberate command to the spaceship that effectively says, turn off your radios. Because once that's done, it's irrevocable. And the spacecraft stops communicating. And I understand there's a treaty saying that we don't want a lot of satellites out there that might inadvertently pick up a signal and bounce it back. But I do think an effort ought to be made, especially in this age of much less expensive radio telescope technology, of being able to hand off some of these missions to university departments, where if you're done with Viking on the surface of Mars, instead of turning off the command receiver, you've gone around to various universities and there's somebody who's got the radio telescope that can communicate with the landers, and you say, okay, you just take it over. The ship is up there. It's already paid for. All you got to pay for is the electricity, and that's not a whole heck of a lot. You'd be surprised how weak the radio signal was that was going back and forth to Mars in the Viking days. And let the kids take it over. And then when you reach the point where you can't find college kids who want to play with it anymore, or it just dies naturally, because that'll happen, then you turn off the command receiver. But those Vikings, they lasted a long, long time, far longer than they were intended to. Same thing with the Spirit and Opportunity. What an amazing mission that they've had there. I'm waiting to see what happens when India gets up to the moon with their probe and rover. That will be fun as well. Okay, let's go back and look through the headlines here and find some stories to close out the show with. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Another variation on the theme of Obama was fully aware that Hillary Clinton paid for the FISA warrant, and apparently Sidney Blumenthal is getting tangled up in this one as well. All of these people are guilty of a violation of Title 18, Section 1001, misrepresentations, material misrepresentations in an official document as part of the process. Apparently, the Democrats are threatening to take Trump down. They're doing it openly. Meanwhile, President Trump is happy about the Nunes memo. He's saying, we caught him, we caught him. Yeah, but they're still out there. You haven't done anything about them. That's like having a burglar alarm that says you're currently being burglarized and you have just been burglarized. Doesn't really change the outcome. Donald Trump needs to put on his presidential brass knuckles, and he needs to do it soon. Because with the Nunes memo and all this other stuff coming on out, the panic is setting in. We've had a year of an attempt at a political coup against the president, and it is failing. What's next? A violent coup? Trump better start thinking of just how much danger he is in from this narcocracy. And as I said, my concern going all the way back to the start of his campaign is that in many ways he is as dangerously naive about Washington, D.C. politics as Jimmy Carter was. And let's see what else we have here. More about the economy. Oh, yeah, here's a good question. I meant to bring this one up earlier. As you know, we have this incident that happened in Syria a short while ago where a Sukhoi 25 aircraft was shot down by a man-pad. And the Sukhoi was flying low down because the best intelligence they had was that these terrorists did not have man-portable missiles. Obviously, that was wrong. And the Sukhoi was hit, the pilot ejected, and once he was on the ground, though, he, rather than surrender to the terrorists, he literally fought them off to the death. And apparently, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, the soldier had detonated a grenade in order to avoid being captured by the notoriously cruel and savage rebels supported by the United States of America. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, his last words were, "Here's for the guys." Now here's the question. Where did the man-pad come from? Not many countries have the technology to make a man-portable surface-to-air missile like the Stinger. So we need to find that out. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Bruce in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Michael.
Hello.
What do you think? What do you think is behind this little movement of people that are pushing flat Earth? What's up with that? Do you have any idea?
Sure. They're attempting to make the internet and the independent media look like a bunch of kooks. Same thing with the fake Apollo moon landings, same thing with chemtrails, same thing with no plane at the Pentagon. It's an old propaganda tactic called poisoning the well.
Yeah, I agree. How about, some people think that there's no nukes. Nukes is a hoax.
I'm sorry, what's a hoax?
Crazy. No, nukes. You haven't heard that one?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, nuclear explosions are a hoax. I've come across that one too. There's people that go about in different message boards pushing that.
Well, again, the goal of all of this is to make social media look untrustworthy and silly in the hope that the American public is going to start migrating back to the warm embrace of ABC, CNN, NBC, MSNBC, PBS, and the various other Ministry of Truth agencies. I don't see it as working because people understand that's what's going on. These really kooky out there stories are deliberately planted propaganda, and people just ignore it because once people understand they're being propagandized, the propaganda ceases to be effective.
Yeah, right. What do you think about Newsweek on the edge of the cliff?
Well, yeah, they seem to be in some serious trouble. The district attorney for Manhattan apparently thinks they've been playing fast and loose with their finances. And apparently the staff upset today was because some of the staff were actually looking into the activities of the parent corporation that owns them. Always a bad idea if your parent corporation is up to no good. Anyway, Bruce, thank you very much for the phone call. We're coming up on our last commercial break of the day. And when we come on back, we're going to try and fit a few more stories in here before we sign off for the rest of our program. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a little bit of a correction. We talked about this story where apparently Adam Schiff's sister was married to Soros' son, and it turns out they're actually not brother and sister. It's a much more distant, tenuous family relationship. So we have to be always careful about what we're putting on out there. Speaking of Soros, apparently George Soros-funded groups are behind this campaign that's opposing Israel's deportation of illegal migrants. So even in Israel, Soros is playing these games. And I'll tell you, I have a real problem with that because Soros is one of those people, like Bill Gates, who seems to think that being a billionaire gives them the right to play God with our planet and its people. And it doesn't. We didn't elect him to do it. All right, we're going to take one final phone call here from Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Hey, how's it going? Regarding the Democratic representatives that said that the locomotive derailment of with the Republicans in it was karma.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm not sure it was Democratic leaders. I think it was like a celebrity, Stephen King, maybe.
Oh, that's right. And then he apologized. But I just want to point out that that's obviously wrong. It was obviously more train related. And then you had a caller that was saying, like, what would the Democrats benefit from derailing the train? And I think it would be sending a message and also revenge for exposing the deep state by voting to release a memo. And also notice how it was the perfect truck. Like if I was wanting to derail the train, I would pick a full dump truck. That's another coincidence. And
I thought it was a full dump truck. One of the photos showed trash just all over the place that had been flipped out from inside the bin.
Yeah, so it's like a perfectly placed. Perfectly placed there. And by the way, did you ever determine if it was in fact parked pointing towards the train?
No, basically it looks like the rear, the trash bin itself was toward the train. The train hit it, spun the truck around. At that point, the rear portion detached and rolled down. The cabin detached and was left behind, and the train dragged the back portion a little bit further, and then it rolled down the hill with the trash. coming on out of it.
Oh, okay.
And that appears to be what happened.
Okay.
I think that, on the assumption that this was some kind of a deliberate operation, I think the people who were in that trash truck were told their job was to force the locomotive to stop. And it never even occurred to them they were going to get hit until it was too late. That's the only thing that actually makes any sense whatsoever.
No, they would have jumped out at the last minute. I think your first instincts are right on where it was somebody murdered, put in the truck.
Well, one of the people in the truck survived, or at least as of the last word. Anyway, there's the music. Thank you for the call. We got to let you go. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everyone you know. Keep this FISA memo, newness memo, whatever you want to call it, in front of everybody, and just work to let everybody know that is still dependent on TV and newspaper, that they are being fed nothing but lies. Remember, Saddam's nuclear weapons is a good example. And we can take this country back from the liars. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.